I was wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong. I was big, bright, and shining wrong. To those of you that got that adaptation of a movie quote that I used to expose the fact that I was wrong in our previous Tenere 700 video, nice job. Leave the movie and the quote in the moment in the comments below, and you will forever be a star in my mind. On to the bulk of the video though, folks. I was wrong in what I was saying in the last video about the Tenere 700 failures we were having. Those parts that are breaking are not a part of the stressed member chassis. They are in fact just supports for the skid plate, the side cowlings, and the radiator. I thought that they were at the time, and I'll go on to explain, I thought that they were part of the chassis, and that's why I was a little concerned and raising the flag. But if you stick through this video, you'll find out why that happened. As we go on though, I want you to stop and think for a second. If these parts that are breaking are not part of the chassis, they kind of are, in the sense that they have to be attached to what is the chassis on this bike. And so therefore aren't they they're not part of the stressed member factors, but they are still part of the chassis, and that skid plates and things like that need things to mount to. And so that's why they are in play, and why this is still a weak point in the Tenere 700. Stick around for the rest of this video though, and I'll go ahead and explain to you, first of all, what happens when you say the wrong information on the internet. Second, I'm going to go ahead and explain how it was I was misunderstanding and misinformed about the situation. I'm going to go ahead and also explain what these parts are and why they are breaking now on a third bike. It was two bikes that had broken at the time of the video roughly a month ago. Now a third one has broken. And the last point I'm going to address is why this, I think, leaves the table and the stage open for a manufacturer to go out there and create the best adventure bike. Riders, before getting into the heart of the video, I want to make sure you've seen that we have launched our web store. It's a web store that we've built ourselves, a bunch of adventure riders getting together, pooling our collective information about the use of this riding gear that we rely on, the parts and the tools and things like that, the tires, all the stuff that we use in our touring and renting operations. We're doing our best to integrate that information and our feedback and our reviews about those products into our web store, hoping it helps you make the right shopping and purchase decisions right away. So please check us out. Okay, back to the video. And to be clear, what happens when you say the wrong information on the internet?
You do that, you go to the box, you feel shame.
And sincerely, I really did feel shame. I should not have been reporting that which was not accurate information. I'll go on to explain how that happened. But as I went on to read the comments, I started to realize, I was still right in basically saying that this is an underbuilt part of the bike. Whether these parts that are breaking are part of the chassis or not, it doesn't matter. I'm telling you that there's evidence that points to stress member chassis arrangements not being perhaps ideal for bikes that take such a pounding like adventure bikes do. Okay, next, on to how I misunderstood the situation. Anybody who saw our comeback video that we made in the earlier part of 2023, you're able to see that we have a lot going on as a company. I am no longer the person that is turning the wrenches or guiding the tours or necessarily doing all the training, the customer service and things like that. A bunch of people are involved with what we are doing. And as such, I was relying on information I was getting through text messages and photos by phone, and I was not actually there in person. So our bikes are down in Baja at the time, this time of year, and I'm up here in Oregon, not even near the bikes where I can actually see in person what's going on. I was under the impression that these were load-bearing struts, essentially, that might be seen in other stress member designs where they have these load-bearing shorter, sort of like 4-inch type little frame pieces that might exist again on some completely different motorcycles. I had no idea that we were talking about a roughly 24-inch long curved piece like that, again, through photos and voice and talking to people, that this was a load-bearing factor. And when I was talking about, the weight of things might actually just collapse down and still just sit on those rising struts like that, such is not the case. Because these are not load-bearing chassis parts, it's not a danger or a risk of having the bike actually collapse when they do fracture. And so again, why are these parts breaking? Well, normally a skid plate would be mounted to actual chassis parts, or in some cases engines. But in this case, they're being attached to these, what's it called, side member sub-assembly parts that are just a fairly frail piece of tubing that Yamaha arranged both on the left and the right side. We will have more information about which skid plate or which crash guards this might be happening with, but I think the issue is that anytime you're mounting crash bars that clamp onto those side member sub-assemblies, that's of course part of the problem, is it's not the kind of design that's meant to take side impacts or whatever. In fact, it's meant to take hits from below. Even in that situation though, I know a lot of guys are talking about how they've completely scarred up their skid plates, and of course they get their bikes dirtier than anybody else when they're going to Starbucks, and they've had no problems with these things breaking. But again, it was 2 that had broken at the time on different bikes, and now a 3rd one. So I'm just going to say that they are breaking because they are underbuilt. They essentially shouldn't be there in the first place, but for the fact that because it's a stressed member chassis, you have to have rails like this in order to put skid plates and radiators and things like that into place. So again, the final point here I want to say is, if you were to choose one motorcycle that could do everything for you, if you're not focused on racing or road tracks or motocross or something like that, if you were to choose one motorcycle, the Tenere 700 is just about in the middle of everything you would ever want to do with a motorcycle. You've got roughly the middle weight. You've got a bike that's fine on the pavement and the turns and the twisties. It's a lot of fun. It's not the best at anything on the pavement, but it's also capable of going into the dirt and taking you places that you might never go with a bike that is dedicated to the pavement. You've got suspension travel and ground clearance, and you've got the reliability of Yamaha all packed together. So again, I'm going to say that the T7 is just a great bike, and we're going to keep using them and buying more of them and integrating them into our touring and renting operations. But ultimately, there's something to be said about whether or not stressed member engines should be put in adventure bikes. A lot of you are saying that, that the stressed member engines have been used for a long time in these bikes. And yes, they have been. And yeah, they seem to be holding up okay, but we have had 2 stressed member engines break on Honda CB500Xs, for example. We had 2 people break the engine case, actually crack and dump oil out all over. Point out that it was back when it was a 17-inch front wheel on that bike, because inevitably it's more rigorous on the frame and the engine with a smaller 17-inch front wheel than it would be on the current 19-inch front wheel that comes on CB500Xs since 2019. So as I alluded to before, I'm going to come back to you with a report on which crash bars were on the specific bikes that had broken, and we can help address the situation, because I really do think it is about that side impact loading. Make sure you like and subscribe and stay tuned with the channel. We'll come back with that information. Again, I'm nowhere near the bikes as they are down on tour right now in Baja. One last thought: in previous videos where I talked about the downside, the cons to the Tenere 700, I had failed to point out something that CRF 300 Rally SE USA did. Because of the geometry of the bike and that anti-squat design, we are inevitably in a position where we have a greater variance of chain tension. It goes from much more slack to much more tight, and as a result puts us in a position where we have to be checking the tension a little bit more frequently than with other bikes. But also, we have noticed a slightly faster than usual usage of our chains and sprockets wearing out on the T7s. Again, I would think that stands to reason that just because of the geometry, you've got a little bit more slack to start with, and then of course you're loading and taking up that slack, but that would, I think, stretch out and affect the life of a chain. So my closing question for you is, should manufacturers be using stressed member engines in these motorcycle designs when a bike is meant to be used for the conditions that we often put them through in adventure riding? And then one more question is, which manufacturer is going to step up and fill that void of the perfect middleweight adventure bike? Again, I say that the middleweights are perfect because they're right in the middle of everything you would want to ever do with a motorcycle. Not super heavy, not too light, comfortable on the road, a little bit comfortable in the dirt. But I'm calling the Yamaha the leader of the pack right now, given again all those factors: reliability, agility, fun, value. But again, I still think there's a manufacturer out there that needs to fill that gap and make the perfect adventure bike, the best ever, the one that has all the factors I previously mentioned, but not the issue of this, side member sub-assembly where you really don't have a great, strong loading point to take the impacts that inevitably we put these bikes through. So I did see the new Suzuki DR800, the V-Strom 800DE, impressive, a little bit better than I had thought. It looks a little more athletic and agile and a little more ground clearance and stuff like that. But again, when you look at how it's built underneath the chassis there, the fact that it's over 500 pounds, it's not quite what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the best middleweight adventure bike in the world. Who's going to make it? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell, make sure you're watching our videos. Thanks very much for your support and commenting below. And again, folks, I apologize that I was giving out wrong information about the T7. It was just an honest misunderstanding and part of what happens when I'm trying to juggle all that we're doing and learning about these things by text and photo. So thanks for watching, everyone.